so satisfying about getting a mare pregnant. You know, a client's beloved horse they really want to breed from, and you're making it happen. It's not a sign of weakness to be wearing a helmet around a horse. I mean, obesity in horses is a huge issue at the moment. It's still about over 50% of horses are obese. We worked out it was about £7 a minute just to open up, not even to get us out and about and seeing the horses. So the other weekend I wasn't working, but in the space of 36 hours I had over 70 messages, WhatsApp videos, photos, all from different people. They don't know everybody else is doing it.
Oh my gosh. Nikki, why I mentioned that the profession has got the highest suicide rates across the country. Why do you think that is the case for vets? Did you know that equine vets have the highest injury rates out of all civilian careers? And they see the highest suicide rates compared to any other profession. But what is it really like, living the life of an equine vet? And how often do you think about the day your vet might be having and their safety during a call out to your horse? Let's go behind the scenes, shall we, to uncover the challenges of the industry with Nikki Pursey, Director of Farr and Pursey, Equine Veterinary Services. Nikki, welcome to Curious Equestrian.
Hi there, it's nice to finally meet you.
Oh, do you know what? The vets are often our first port of call with our horses, aren't they? If anything goes wrong, it's the first person we often pick up the phone to say, oh, I'm panicked, I'm worried. But rarely do we think about the day that our vet is having. Talk us through, Nikki, the sort of day in the life of a vet.
Oh, crikey. Well, I mean, technically our working hours are 8:30 till 5:30 at my practice, but usually I'll wake up to a couple of text messages, some WhatsApp messages that have come through over the course of the night. So I might be answering those before I even get to work. This time of year, we're deep into stud season. So actually my day, because I'm the main stud vet at the practice, often starts earlier than 8:30. I can be out onto yards for as early as sort of 7 o'clock, sometimes even earlier. But my sort of typical day would begin at 8:30. I usually go to the office, first of all, just to load up on the kit, check the diary, see what I need for the day, just touch base with the rest of the team, make sure they're all right and there's no issues going there. Nobody's crashed a car. Everything's working on the tech side. There's all these bits that happen behind the scenes that you just don't realise, and things that go wrong. So yeah, I'll check through my diary, and then usually it's straight out onto the road for visits. We don't have a clinic base at our practice, so we just work out the back of our cars. So we're on the road pretty much all day, going from visit to visit, and I can do pretty much anything in a day. We're a first opinion practice, so I'll do my routine vaccinations, routine dentals, right the way through to the stud work, as I've mentioned. We'll do lameness workups on the yard. We'll do minor surgery as well. Sometimes we get a surgeon down to help us with that. We'll deal with emergencies as and when they come in. So you might have a beautifully planned day and then suddenly there's a horse stuck in a ditch that you've got to go and help. So no day is ever quite what it looks like it's going to be on paper. But for the vast majority of it, I will be out and about on the road with clients and their horses, and then I might finish at 5:30. I might finish a lot later than that. Occasionally I might get time for some paperwork during the course of the day, and then in the evening there's the on-call as well. So we typically work a 1 in 4 rota at my practice. So I'd have a regular weeknight on-call and then 1 in 4 weekends, and that's hugely variable. Sometimes it can be really quiet and you have a nice easy evening at home. Sometimes you can be going from emergency to emergency to emergency. Sometimes you'll get woken up at 2 o'clock in the morning. It just depends, and I think that's one of the things that makes the job so interesting. No 2 days are ever the same.
And Nikki, talk us through the challenges of the job, because I think a lot of horse owners don't realise that it is an industry with the highest injury rates in a civilian job, and actually, very sadly, the highest suicide rates in the country. So what struggles do you face on a daily basis?
I think the struggles I faced have probably changed a bit as I've progressed through my career. So I've been qualified 17 years now. And as a new graduate, you're sort of absolutely terrified of going out there, dealing with your first emergency, the stress of getting it right, keeping clients happy, doing the best for the horses. And then as you progress through your career, and obviously we set up this practice, me and my business partner, nearly 10 years ago. My stresses are now a little bit different. Yes, I have all the work-related stresses, but I have all the practice management stresses as well. So the staffing issues, keeping everybody on the road, making sure everybody's happy, sourcing the correct drugs and everything like that. So it does change a little bit as your career progresses, and depending on what path your career takes as well, whether you're in first opinion, whether you end up at a referral hospital, whether you go into industry. But I think probably the biggest issues we as a practice have at the moment, I think client relationships are always a really, really key area. I mean, I count us really lucky in our practice. A lot of my clients I think of as friends. I've known some of them 15 years. I have a really good working relationship with them. They know how I work. I know how they work, what their limitations are, what drives them, what's a hard line for them that they won't cross, all these sorts of things. And I can be there for them more as a friend, and not necessarily always as their vet, which I find is actually quite a privileged position. But it's hard sometimes dealing with people that you don't know. We've had a lot of bad press recently as a profession, because the CMA are investigating prices, and that is always something that does come back at us in some way, shape or form, that we're out for money, we're driving the prices higher and higher. And at the end of the day, all us vets want to do is treat the animals in front of us, look after them, get them better, keep the owners happy. We're very much not in it for the money, but sadly we've got overheads. And that's always a hard thing to get across to people, that we have those limitations, and unfortunately money does have to come into the conversation a lot of the time. So that's one of the biggest challenges. We're also quite limited in terms of medications that we can use in horses, which a lot of people don't realise. We are bound by various pieces of legislation which say what we can and cannot prescribe and in what order. So sometimes, yes, there might be a cheaper alternative, but we're not legally allowed to prescribe it. So our hands are a bit tied, and it's communicating that to clients that it's not us being really panicky and trying to grab money. We just don't have a choice, and the consequences for us straying from that can be quite severe on a professional basis. There's also then, dare I say, the dangers of the job, as you alluded to. We've all been kicked, bitten, trampled on at some point. I myself have been kicked in the head twice, fortunately quite mildly, but have necessitated trips to hospitals. I know vets that have had their feet completely crushed, and they've been on crutches. They've severed tendons in their hands with hoof knives. It is dangerous, and we're, as a profession, we've been quite bad at wearing safety kit. So say wearing hard hats, which you wouldn't dream of getting on a horse without one. Yet we'll quite happily stick needles in legs without wearing a hard hat. So that is starting to change. We're starting to have more of a conversation that it's not a sign of weakness to be wearing a helmet around a horse. It's just being sensible. You've only got one head and you need to look after it. So that that's a real biggie. They're unpredictable, as we all know, and we're often doing quite unpleasant things to them. So it's always a conversation to have with the owner as well. We sedate things because we need to. It's not just for the horse's safety, it's for ours as well. And sometimes the owners, because you never quite know how a horse is going to react, and they may bolt forward into the owner, knock the owner over. So it's for everybody involved.
There's so many aspects of the job, Nikki, to ask you about. But going back to, you mentioned the price investigations that are currently going on right now. How do you feel about those investigations? And what do you say to clients who say, call outs are astronomical, a vet only has to touch a horse and it costs a huge amount of money? What would you say to them?
I say that I'm pleased that the investigation is going ahead, because I do think there are some aspects of it that have got a little bit out of control, but there are lots of factors that we can't control. There are lots of overheads that clients don't see, and we actually sat down and did the maths as to how much it costs to basically open the doors of our practice and not do any work or anything. And I think we worked out it was about £7 a minute just to open up, not even to get us out and about and seeing the horses. So doing that was quite an eye-opening exercise. And actually, we've since, when you start then discussing with clients and explaining what goes on behind the scenes, you have to have people answering telephones, you have to get the drugs in before you can even get them out to the client, you have to have all the kit there. And it's really about communicating that to people and saying where it's coming from. We also, particularly us as a small independent practice, we're sometimes quite penalised by the drug companies themselves. So you'll go onto an online pharmacy and the drugs will look a lot cheaper. Well, sometimes we can't even buy the drugs in from our wholesalers at the price that you can buy it on online. We're paying more than that. So we obviously can't sell it at a loss, otherwise we wouldn't be able to open at all. So the online pharmacies, they have much bigger buying power. So they can, of course, negotiate better deals and keep the price. So they don't have the overheads. They've got a warehouse, they've got people packaging things, but they don't have people on phones. They don't have cars to have on the road. So I think it is all about communicating with people where the money's going, because they just don't see it, particularly when it's just me in a car with a boot full of drugs, maybe some kits. And I do think in some ways us having access to the NHS kind of makes us forget how much these things actually cost. I mean, I had an appointment reminder through a text from the NHS the other day saying if I don't turn up, and this is just a routine sort of a pre-op, it costs the NHS £160. So it's actually, I think, when the NHS do that, actually it helps people relate to the costs. And yes, things like MRI and CT scans are so much more in animals, but you've got sedative, you've got an anaesthetic agent, and then you've got people monitoring the anaesthesia. And you're not just paying for those minutes in the time, you're also paying for the years of training that vet has gone through. So once we start talking to people about it, and I think they start realising that we're not money grabbing, but there's a lot of practices that just don't communicate that, and I don't think that helps the conversation at all.
And Nikki, why I mentioned that the profession has got the highest suicide rates across the country. Why do you think that is the case for vets?
I think there's numerous factors. One just has to be access to drugs. The dangerous drugs are easily on hand. So if somebody reaches that point, unfortunately, it doesn't take much more for them to get those drugs. Whereas for the general population, they'd be a lot harder to come by. So sometimes when people reach that absolute bottom, it's just too quick almost to make that decision. It can be quite a lonely job in some ways. Less so now with smartphones, but certainly when I first graduated, I just had a normal brick phone. I couldn't get any signal, so I was driving around the countryside for hours, and the only people I was talking to were clients. Wasn't really able to talk to my peers that easily about what was going on. So people I'd graduated with, it was sometimes quite hard to catch them for a chat in the evening and say, well, look, how are you coping? You know, I've had a really bad day, and have somebody talk you through it and go, well, do you know what? Actually, my day was even worse. And you end up sharing horror stories, but feeling better because you know somebody else is going through it. The hours can be really long, particularly in practices that do their own out of hours, and that is changing a little bit, especially on the small animal side. You know, have out of hours providers, but you can have a situation where you've worked the whole way through till 5:30, and then you're out till 2 a.m. and expected to work the whole of the following day. So that becomes quite wearing. The demands based on us or placed on us from clients as well, we've become very accessible with smartphones, and I think particularly on the equine side, less so on the small animal side, where you maybe see your vet for 10 minutes and then no more than that. Whereas with my clients, I'll be on the yard for 3-4 hours. I'll get to know them really well. They have my mobile number. Yes, it's a work mobile number, not my personal number, but there are an awful lot of people that don't think anything of contacting you at unsociable hours with not very major queries. It's not an emergency. They just want to check something. Can they send you a video of this? It's 9-10 o'clock at night. It's on their mind, and all you want to do is go to bed. And that's quite hard to switch off from. You want to be there for your clients, but sometimes it's just the sheer volume. The other weekend, I wasn't working, but in the space of 36 hours, I had over 70 messages, WhatsApp videos, photos, all from different people. They don't know everybody else is doing it.
Oh my gosh. No.
Yeah. So it gets to what every time my phone went, I just was like, oh my word. It does grind you down like that. And so we have to get better at switching off. And there are times when I'm trying to be better and say, look, I might not answer because I'm trying to have a life outside of work. But it's because it's my own business as well. And I say a lot of them are friends. I want to be there for them, but it does take its toll. There's also your cases don't go according to plan. You're constantly questioning if you're doing the right thing. Could you do better? And dare I say, we see it in so many professions. Social media really hasn't helped. It takes nothing for somebody to just write a comment on social media, slating you, not happy with the practice. And those really get to us. It's quite incredible how much we just go away and just think about it and dwell on it. And the problem is a lot of the time you can't get your point of view across because you can't start a slanging match over social media. So we just have to absorb it, and that gets really hard. We all try our best. We all love our patients, and some days you have a bad day. Some things just don't go according to plan. A lot of the complaints come down to money. So those sorts of things just all weigh you down. And I think if you've not got a good support network, you've not got your method of switching off, it just gets to be too much for some people. We are working really hard as a profession to improve the mental health aspect. There's a lot more support networks out there. There's a lot more support for newly qualified vets, because that's often a really lonely time when you're just learning so much straight out of uni. You're struggling to cope with all the information, the new cases, the new techniques you're learning, dealing with clients, writing up clinical notes, knowing how the equipment works. So the support is there. There's a very good charity called Vet Life who provide mental health support, financial support and health support as well. And each branch of the profession. So obviously I use the British Equine Veterinary Association beaver, they would be sort of the body I would turn to the most. There's a lot more information there about support, places to turn, ways to look after your mental health. So it is something that we're addressing, and it is changing, but it all takes time, unfortunately.
And you mentioned the love for your patients, which is, of course, we all think of vets, don't we? And we imagine that they went into that profession because they love animals. But something that comes hand in hand with the animal is the client, is the owner. And as a horse owner myself, we know that horse owners are notorious and have a terrible reputation for being overprotective and defensive and sometimes aggressive. How do you cope with the clients that do go for the jugular when out on a call out?
It's really tough. And sometimes it sounds awful. There's some clients you just can't get through to. And sometimes you need somebody else from the practice just to step in and say, look, would you mind just having a word? Or if they're not happy with you, would you mind if I got my colleague out just to have a second opinion? We are really fortunate. Our client base is lovely. So now those conversations are really quite rare. It's more, they're just so caring. They want to do everything, and you're trying to do everything as quickly as you can and get them answers. But sometimes you need to seek the opinions of the specialists and things like that. So we do call on other people as a backup, which isn't a way out. It's just almost reassuring the client that we are trying to do the best for them.
And of course, it's not always aggression, is it? It's impatience. And as you say, it's that care for the animal. And when we love anyone or anything, we all get very, don't we, uptight about their care and what happens to them. So I guess that just comes out of the panic in the situation.
And this, most vets themselves are animal owners, be it horses, dogs, cats, whatever. So we do know what it's like to be on the receiving end. My cat was really ill in February, and I suddenly realised I'd turned into that client with my small animal vet. I was a wreck when she was ill. I was useless. So it does. I think when you're an animal owner as well, you do realise where clients are coming from, and that they don't necessarily mean to be snappy or something. They're just stressed and they're worried, and that just shows how much they love their animals. And for me, I was a hairy pony owner. I'm not anymore, sadly. He's no longer with us. But that's actually the kind of owner I can relate to. The kind of owner that would, dare I say, chop off an arm, sell a kidney if it would save their horse. I have done a bit of polo work. I've never really done any racing work. I like, in some ways, the demanding clients because that's who I can relate to. They just love their animals so much. They do anything for them, and that gives me so much satisfaction being able to help those people.
And then, of course, you mentioned the dangers of the job. I imagine you come into very close contact with horses that have behavioural issues or have behavioural issues because of the pain they're in and the difficulties they're facing. How do you keep yourself safe? And also, why do you think, you mentioned about vets just now starting to wear hats out on call-outs. Why has it taken so long for vets to wear hard hats?
I think there's been some deep-rooted thing that we're seen to be scared if we wear hard hats. It's seen as a weakness, that we're fearful of the animal and that we're therefore projecting the wrong image to both the client and the horse, which is just ridiculous. And these days, I'm afraid, I don't care what I look like. I'm in my old hat. I've got my steel-toe cap boots. My safety, the client's safety has to come first. And I think when you're a new graduate as well, there's a lot of pressure. Clients say, I don't want to pay for sedation. And then you're like, well, I've got to do this with a horse that's messing around. It always goes from bad to worse. It never ends well. Nowadays, I'm just say, well, I'm sorry, I have to sedate or I can't do the job. And if you won't let me sedate, I will be walking away. It's so that I can do a proper job as well. So it's not just for my safety. It's so that I can do the thorough job I need to and do the best by your horse. a lot of, we're working quite closely with some owners who genuinely do. There are obviously really needle shy horses out there that do take time, and those ones that are particularly dangerous or something, we will allow extra time in the appointment so that it isn't a rush. You're not just walking up and trying to stab them with a vaccination and then walk away. We want to take that time to just be around the horse, get them used to having a vet around them, a strange person that smells a bit clinical and things like that. There's also some useful resources out there for horse owners as well. So the British Equine Veterinary Association have a series of videos on YouTube. I think they're entitled "Don't Break Your Vet." So there's useful information on there about how to prepare your horse for a vet visit. I think there's clicker training with regards to injections. So I always try and steer clients towards those. But there's a lot of people, sadly, that just they don't want to put the effort in. And
I noticed that, Nikki, I noticed this online and also within the local vets that I use, that now they are teaching clicker training for difficult ponies, or even ponies that aren't usually difficult but are on the day that they're suffering or they're in pain or they've got an injury. And something so fascinating to me, seeing that over the years, vets changing their way of handling ponies. Years ago, me seeing the vets just getting stuck in, grabbing the horse, having a firm hand, holding firmly on the head collar and administering whatever it is as quickly as possible. And now seeing actually often 2-3 vets together in a stable, working together, doing some clicker training in front of my eyes, and sort of thinking, wow, they're actually working on behaviour, they're working on the bond and the relationship rather than quickly getting something done.
This is it. And much always rather take that time just standing just in the vicinity of the horse so that they know we're not a threat. I've groomed horses before I've done them, just getting them to relax. I think, yes, we're in a rush. We've got a list of patients that we've got to see, but actually those 5-10 minutes could save you so much bother down the line. Or sometimes you're not even there to see the dangerous horse, but I'll stop and I'll give them a carrot whilst I'm on my way to another one. So it's having the time and seeing the bigger picture.
And it's really interesting you mention about vets not wearing hats, because it's something that's always made me think years and years. It was probably about 10 years ago now, when I was a teenager. I watched a vet come out to a young horse on the livery yard that I was at, a very unhandled young horse, and the vet was dealing with, he'd been kicked in the field, so he was dealing with the bandaging. And the young horse somehow, even though the vet was very tightly wrapping up the bandage, managed to get one of his back feet loose. And no word of a lie, I watched this hoof skim over the vet's head and missed him within about half an inch. And I remember thinking, wow, you had luck on your side. You're an amazing old school vet that everyone loves. But if you'd have just tipped your head up a little bit higher, you'd have been struck dead.
Might not be
and
here.
I wondered how he coped with the pressures of that and, the fact that he could lose his life out on the job. But actually, why was he taking that risk when a hat could have prevented any kind of injury or any kind of risk at all? So it's great to hear that communication and that vision of a vet, that image of a vet that we see is changing to one with a hard hat on the yard.
Yeah, so don't be surprised if your vet dons one in future. They might not always, and certainly I won't with the vast majority, but I'm not prepared to take that risk. Yeah, having had a few near misses myself, it's not a sign of weakness. It's being sensible. I wouldn't ride a bike without a cycle helmet. Yeah,
and we've heard the greats, haven't we? Like Charlotte Dujardin wearing a hat on the ground and saying, wear it for your groundwork, wear it in your trot-ups, wear it leading your horse from the trailer, because actually at any point an accident can happen, not just in the saddle.
They're creatures with a mind of their own. You don't even have to be doing something unpleasant to them. Something could drop from height and send them bolting through central London. Something could jump out the bush. They're not predictable. So why not just take that element of risk out, especially when I am often doing not particularly pleasant things to them.
And Nikki, I asked this question with my face actually melting in the heat that I'm sitting in the studio right now, so I've had to turn the fan off because of the whirring noise. How do you cope in extreme weathers, heat waves, snowstorms,
electrical storms. How do you cope in those scenarios when you have to focus on an unpredictable animal?
It's certainly been a challenge the last few days. I wear a lot of waterproofs because of doing the stud work, so I have been melting a lot. Fortunately, a lot of my clients are very well trained and will supply me with a cold drink, which makes all the difference. Something like that just goes such a long way. Wearing lead aprons for x-raying is never fun in this heat. Sadly, it's needs must. There are some things that we won't do if it's extreme heat. So if we can avoid it, we will try not to sedate them. I wouldn't be doing a vetting and asking the horse to get really tired and out of breath and galloping around. It's just not sensible. So there are days when we say, look, we can't do this. Most equine vets would have 4-wheel drive vehicles, so these days we can get to most things. But similarly, if there's snow on the ground, we are sensible. Yes, we'll do with emergencies, but I'm not going to perform a vetting when the ground is frozen, when the school's frozen and I can't lunge. It's amazing how many people actually think you can still do these things. They're like, well, you wouldn't ride on a frozen school, so why would you want me to do a vetting on one? So there are times when we just have to be like, look, it's just not sensible. But we've all got sunburnt, we've all been up to our knees in mud, we've all been absolutely drowned at some point in time. But a cold drink or a cup of tea also goes a very, very long way. But it certainly adds a unique challenge to some of the situations that we're in. Horses
Nikki,
stuck down in mud.
What would you say it takes to be a vet? Obviously, we know you have to be intelligent and pass your exams and head off for a very long training at university. But what does it take in the person's personality and character, do you think?
I think you probably have to have a screw loose. I think if you... The job is constantly changing. You're constantly learning. So it really suits somebody that doesn't want to rest on their laurels. They want to learn new techniques. They want to read the latest research. They want to be constantly challenged. So if you're one of those people, then it will really suit you. If you love speaking, well, from an ambulatory point of view, if you love speaking to clients, because as you've already said, every horse comes with an owner attached. And I love that. I couldn't work in a referral hospital or industry because I really love my clients. I like being there for them at the good times, and then especially when things aren't going right for them and right at the end. So you do have to like people. There's no two ways around it. You have to be able to talk to people and understand where they're coming from and where their concerns are. And I think you've got to not mind working some crazy hours, unfortunately. So things are changing a bit, but it isn't a 9-to-5 job. And even if you do finish at 5, chances are you're going home reading about cases, dwelling on things, having a few sleepless nights. So it suits somebody who wants a challenge, who's not afraid of hard work, who likes the physical aspect of it as well, because sometimes it can be quite physically exhausting. You can be on your feet all day. Similarly, I can have some days where I'm just sat in the car, jump out, do a vaccination, get back in the car and drive to the next one. But somebody who wants a constant challenge, constantly varied day, doesn't mind having things thrown at them totally unexpectedly. And there's so many pathways down which you can go as well. It's a lot more open-ended, your career choices, than you think. It's not just, I'll be a vet in practice. So the opportunities are endless.
And you mentioned, Nikki, that it is stud season. Why are you so passionate about breeding and AI?
Well, I'll be perfectly honest with you, I left uni absolutely hating it. I was really, the way it was taught, I was just like, this is really boring. I have no desire to do this. I'll just sort of stick with the medicine route. I thought that's probably where I want to go. And then my first job down in Devon, my boss had his certificate in stud medicine. He said, I really want to train you up to do the stud work so I can have a holiday in stud season. And I was like, really? Oh. And I had some amazing studs down there. He was a great teacher. He really took time to teach me the skills needed for it. And then I had some great studs where I could practice. They didn't mind if it took me a little bit longer to scan a mare and find the ovaries and the uterus. And I think just being in that kind of environment was such a great basis for it. And then I think there's just something so satisfying about getting a mare pregnant. You know, a client's beloved horse they really want to breed from, and you're making it happen. And the excitement when you do a 14-day pregnancy scan and you just see this little black circle on the screen and you know that's a pregnancy, it's just the best feeling in the world. And
you're creating life. That life only exists because of you.
Yeah. And it's not the sort of black and white that it was taught at uni. There's so many nuances to it and things we can do to help them and improve fertility, and they don't read textbooks. And I love it. I find it so satisfying. Yes, it's stressful, and clients have invested a lot of money, and sometimes mares just don't get in foal, or dare I say, they don't go to term, or things happen with the birth. But I think just being involved in that process, it's a real privilege. And I love seeing the fruits of my labours on the ground, and there's foals that I've made that are now out competing quite successfully, and it's lovely to see. It is what gives me a real buzz.
And are you there, Nikki, from day one for the covering until the foal drops?
Yeah, so we mainly do chilled AI work in our practice. We have got a couple of clients that do some natural cover. We've chosen not to do frozen semen AI or embryo transfer just because of our setup, being out on the road. For those sorts of things, you ideally need a clinic base. So it's mainly the chilled semen AI. So yeah, I would do the scans as the mare's coming into season, working out when we should order the semen for, doing the insemination, seeing everything's all right afterwards, and then first pregnancy scan, and all the way through to hopefully a live foal on the ground.
And am I right in saying it's quite a panicked time in terms of timings and racing to get the semen to the mare, and all parties are sort of go, go, go? Yeah,
it can be. And this is, again, where communication comes in. So I'm always like, make sure you've got good channels with the stud, so we know when we can order semen. Is the stallion suddenly away competing, or the stud owner's on holiday and you can't order it? So with good communication, it actually makes it a lot less panicked, because you can warn them. So it then can sort of bumble along quite nicely. Go, okay, well, I think we'll be ordering semen tomorrow for delivery the following day. It's usually things like the post can cause the most stress, and actually there are a few issues getting semen from the continent after Brexit. It got held at ports, it got lost in delivery centres. So that posed an extra. That was really stressful that year. And I had clients pretty much driving all over the country to delivery depots trying to work out where this semen had ended up.
I bet that was a surreal experience.
It was, and then trying to explain it to the man behind the counter just what they were after.
Oh my goodness, only in the day of a life of a vet.
Yeah, right, stuff like that. So
and how tricky is it to birth the mare, to birth the foal from the mare? How risky is that process if someone is thinking about putting their mare in foal?
Well, most mares will actually do it quite well on their own. We're very lucky because of them being a flight animal. They have to get on with it quite quickly in the wild. So actually, second stage labour sort of lasts about 20 minutes or so. So it does mean there's quite a small window of intervention. But on the whole, most mares will foal down quite successfully on their own. We don't see so many issues with over large foals getting stuck like you do, say, with the cattle. So things like cesarean sections are much, much more rarely performed, thankfully. It's usually a case that there's issues with them coming out backwards, or with their long limbs, one's tucked back, and so they get a bit stuck in that respect. So for the vast majority, it's just a case of, well, if you're lucky to enough see it, just watching them them get on with it, and foals will stand remarkably quickly after birth, or should do. When things go wrong, that's when there's quite a bit of time pressure, because the mare has such forceful contractions and everything does have to happen so quickly, that can be quite a stressful situation. The decision-making pathway has to be quite quick. But, I always say to people, if you're not experienced at foaling down, say it's their first time of breeding, you may well be better sending the mare away to stud to foal down, where there are experienced people on hand who have done this before, who know the early warning signs when things aren't going to plan, and can intervene. I've gone out to foalings at the person's house where I've sort of sat there for about 4 hours because the mare's kind of just been in first stage labour, and it's happening and it's not happening, and it's happening and it's not happening. And yeah, so.
Oh, and what's that moment like? Obviously, some people very lucky get to see foals every year if they're part of a stud yard or a stud farm. What's it like for those who've never seen a foal born in those early moments when they've just hit the decks and they've just landed?
It is incredible. Just the way most mares will be with the foal, and just how quickly the foals get up. I mean, you think of how useless human babies are, and foals will often be trying to stand within minutes. They'll be suckling sort of with it within an hour, and once they've dried off, crikey, you think they've been on the ground for ages. The speed is just incredible, the speed at which they hopefully get on with it. They're much better at adapting to things than we are.
Oh, and Nikki, talk us through. It's also, you say it's stud season. We're also dealing with that spring into summer weather now. We've got the grass growing, haven't we? I imagine you're seeing a lot of problem cases to do with the grass and weight management. What are you seeing owners struggling with at the moment?
Well, exactly as you say, it's weight management, it's pasture management, and then the knock-on effects of things like laminitis. We've had some quite nasty ones this year, mainly because the grass is constantly growing. Obesity in horses is a huge issue at the moment. It's still about over 50% of horses are obese. It's a conversation I'm having daily with horse owners, and whilst there is more awareness of it, sometimes it's helping people recognize the problem and then helping them to work out what they can do to address the problem, because not every owner yard is set up for weight management. An owner might be on board, but a yard owner might not be on board. So that's really tough. And yeah, we've had quite a few laminitis cases this year, unfortunately. We're quite proactive as a practice, and I think more vets are getting proactive. We have a part-time nurse who works for us, and she runs weight management and worming clinics. So she'll go out to yards with a weigh bridge, and she will offer worming advice. She will do worm egg counts. She will also offer weight management advice as well. And obviously a lot of the major feed companies now will go out with mobile weigh bridges as well, and those are a really, really good thing to get out to yards, just to highlight the problem, because I think a lot of people just don't necessarily realize that their horse is overweight. There's still a lot of ignorance around it, and dare I say, show condition still doesn't help. We're still perpetuating that, and yes, there are now starting to be awards in classes for the horse that the vet deems is in the best condition health-wise, not show condition. But it's breaking down that stigma. It's helping owners realise there is a problem, and then helping them address that problem. That's probably one of the biggest challenges facing us.
How do we communicate that and get something changed if it is a traditional competition that has existed for hundreds of years in the equestrian community?
This is the problem that the industry has, and there's always talks about how we can address it. And yes, we have to address it at the grassroots level. We do need to address it at the competition level, and this is why they're introducing these awards. But until they are in every class, nothing is going to change. And dare I say, there's the old boys, that needs to filter down, and we need to have a changing conversation about what makes a healthy horse. So hopefully more awareness of it and slowly infiltrating into the showing side of things will help.
And I read something online the other day as well, Nikki, that said even away from the showing world, us as owners we've forgotten what a healthy horse looks like. And there was a comparison of sort of the everyday horse now, overweight with a bit of a belly, and actually what a horse should look like, and how we've forgotten actually what a fit horse should look like. How do we share that in amongst the equestrian community? How do we communicate that to horse owners when it can be so difficult to juggle?
That's it is educating, guys. It's making those the resources available to them, and so body condition score charts can be really, really helpful. There's a couple of different scales that seem, well, there's obviously never one universal thing, but those often have line drawings of horses in different conditions. So it's getting that information out there, and it is widely available online and from all the major equine charities. Most of the feed companies will have that on there as well. So body condition score charts are a really easy thing to have on the yard. Have a laminated one up on the wall. Make a note in your diary to do it once every couple of weeks, once a month. Get your hands on there, feel where the fat is, have a feel of the cresty neck, all these. Put a weigh tape around as well. It's having those visual reminders, but it's changing people's mindset. It is building those good habits. And I know myself how easy it is to forget to do something. I have to set reminders in my phone to do things or write it on my to-do list. So something like that, I say to clients, well, set a reminder in your phone that, to go off once a month, that you need to condition score. And if you're not sure about condition scoring, say speak to a nutritionist, get them out to do a yard visit, or get your vet out to show you how to condition score, and then keep a written log of it, and keep photos as well, because a lot of owners won't see the change on a day-to-day basis because you're seeing your horse every day. So I say, well, take a snap on the first of each month, take a photo of your horse. That way you might put them side by side and go, oh my word, he's put on a lot and I hadn't realised that. They don't all put on weight in the same place, much like us, apples and pears. Just because the girth is the same and on the same holes doesn't mean that they've not got more fat on their neck. So it's educating clients again, building those good habits. They know teaching them what to look out for, building those good habits that they've got to monitor, and that way they'll be able to recognise things hopefully before they become an issue.
Nikki, as well as with horse owners, we've all got so much to think about, haven't we? There's so much we need to look for and stay on top of and manage, whether it's fencing or whether it's the worming of our horses or nutrition or exercise. It's so hard to then build in something else we need to check. So it's just something we need to add to our list and sort of get used to keeping on top of, like we do all the other aspects of horse care. Also, it's quite interesting, actually. I said to you all, at this time of year, we have to look at weight management. We have to watch out for laminitis. But we've had some very extreme weathers. We've had a really obscenely wet spring and autumn and winter. We've had mild winters where I'll be clocking the grass is still growing at a time that I can usually count on the fact that my horses will lose weight. Actually, they're not losing weight through the winter. They're putting on weight, and actually they can go down with laminitis. I've got 2 miniature horses, an American miniature and a Shetland cross.
Lovely.
And I used to think, autumn, winter, they're my safe zones. I don't have to worry. Now we're having to monitor them all year round. Are you noticing that with climate change, actually horse ownership is changing?
Absolutely. We really don't have a season for laminitis anymore. I can see it all year round for those very reasons that you've just said. It never used to be like that, except where I was in Devon, where we had good cow grass all year round, but it has now crept up this way. I'm based in the home counties, and we see it all year round. The grass just doesn't really stop growing. And I think people have been quite slow to realise that, as you say, the mindset is the grass stops growing in winter. This is when they lose weight. But we rug our horses beautifully in winter, so they don't lose weight. You know, you've got the natural cycle out in the wild where they will put on weight during the summer and then they will shiver it off during the winter. Whereas we don't do that. We let them have lovely rugs on so they don't shiver up. And actually, it's a really useful way of getting them to lose weight, to under rug them during the winter, to clip them. It's been shown that over rugging is actually a far bigger welfare issue than under rugging. And there are some quite useful tables available online which say sort of your type of horse, the temperature, and what the ideal rug weight that they should be wearing, if at all, would be. And I always say to my clients, don't be afraid of under rugging. Yes, there are some horses that need rugging. They get absolutely miserable. And certainly when it's horrible, you know, they don't have to be naked, but use nature to your advantage, because it's not helping you at the moment because the grass is growing. So if it gets a little bit colder, make the most of that cold weather and make them shiver a bit off. So if your horse turns out to be one of those ones that really doesn't cope and just goes miserable, fair enough. But until you try it, you won't know. And just because you're cold doesn't mean he will be.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Our horses, they're all rescues, but they're all unrugged in the winter for that exact reason, because they're all good doers. They all put on weight in the summer months and they can shiver it off in the winter. But we actually clipped our little American miniature, Deezer, who grows an incredibly thick yak-like coat in the winter that's crazy thick, and takes him almost all year if he were left to his own devices to actually shed it off. So we've always clipped him in the spring. But last autumn, we gave him a little triangle clip just around his tummy and his girth, and absolutely amazing results in terms of helping to keep his weight down. So we're going to do it every autumn now. We're going to give him that little clip, you know, still got the protection, the fluff on his back, on his bum, but just to give him that extra help in keeping the tummy down. Just anything we can do really to counterbalance this ever-growing grass all year long that I'm just personally horrified as a horse owner to try and keep on top of. Nikki, got to ask you, we've focused a lot on the challenges and the struggles of a life of a vet, but I've got to ask you, what are the joys? What really makes you smile? What really gives you purpose and fulfillment as a vet in your daily life?
I think I found my place in the veterinary world. I nearly left the profession about 10 years ago. I wasn't happy. This was in my previous job and I thought I was totally disillusioned, but I sort of stuck with it because I didn't know what else I wanted to do. And I thought, well, some inspiration will come to me at some point and I'll figure out what I want to do with my life. But veterinary isn't it. And then it just so happened that one of the vets I was working with, who is now my business partner, came and said to me that he was setting up on his own. And I tongue-in-cheek said, oh, do you want a business partner? And he said yes. And I went, oh, I better find some money then. And that was how our business formed. And actually, having never wanted to be a practice owner, I love it. I love my veterinary work, but I also love the challenge that building and managing a practice has brought. And I think the whole package gives me a lot of satisfaction. I love seeing what we've built. So we've gone from just the two of us to we now have 6 vets at the moment,
Wow.
about 3 admin staff and a nurse. So I love seeing that. I like doing sort of, you know, working out pricing strategies. What equipment do we need to buy? So that's one area of the job I get huge, and that really actually complements the veterinary side quite nicely. I get to do a bit of everything that I love, and I'm really surprised I enjoy the business side of things. So I found what works for me and I would not change it. I love being a first opinion vet. I love being out on the road, driving around, listening to my music or my podcast, getting out, chatting to clients who are just like old friends, having a cup of tea. Sometimes they feed me cake. Just spending time around the animals I love, challenging myself, being out in the sunshine, being out in all weathers, but particularly the sunshine. and just realizing I'm making a difference to people. I'm helping them. I'm there for them. Sometimes at some of the lowest points and the worst points in their life, I can be there for them. I can be the support that they need, the person that says, you're doing the right thing. That's a very privileged position to be in. So I love my clients. I love my patients. My team is amazing as well. In my practice, it feels a bit like a family, and I'm very, very lucky. I found what works for me. There's plenty of people that would be an absolute horror show for them. They couldn't think of anything worse. They want to be in a referral hospital. They want the pressures of surgery, and that's what drives them. So I think I'd say to anybody out there who either wants to be a vet or is a vet and struggling, find what works for you. Don't be afraid to change, because honestly, setting up the practice, doing what I do now, is the best thing I've ever done. I still have my moments, don't get me wrong, where I think, why am I doing this? But I would say that for 99% of my time, I love what I do, and I feel very, very grateful that I've ended up in this position.
And Nikki, thank you for talking us through all of the challenges and the struggles, because they are very emotive, and it is really, actually at points, hard to listen to some of the real difficulties that vets have to face with the isolation and the mental impact as well. But what would you say, and what can be done for the young up-and-coming vets, or those who want to, have always said they dreamt of becoming a vet, but actually have been put off by the dangers of the job, the loneliness, the all-weathers, the long hours, the mental implications? How can you keep them in the industry, and how can you encourage them into a very problematic profession?
Well, I would say don't be put off for a start. I think if anybody's at school wanting to become a vet, doing your work experience is really important. I think when I applied, which was far too long ago now, we had to do about a minimum of sort of almost 12 weeks of work experience prior to applying. The requirements are now a lot less, but the more work experience you do, the more it will open your eyes to the different types of work out there, but B, what's to be expected of you. The support at uni is a lot better. I know from speaking to my much younger colleagues these days, you have things like communication skills. At uni, you have sessions on sort of how to have that difficult conversation with a client. So we are preparing vets better for life outside in the real world. So I think that's a really good starting point. And companies such as Vet Life they're going into the vet schools and having those conversations and saying, look, this support is out there. There's apps there's WhatsApp groups, there's new graduate support networks, they do pub meets in the area and things like that. And I would say those are really important to get involved with. It's about not isolating yourself. You'll have a horror story. Somebody will always have a worse horror story, because things go wrong, or in your mind you think it's wrong or it's gone badly, and it hasn't. And just being able to talk to people in a similar situation is so important. I catch up with one of my vet friends sort of every 3 months or so, and we do the same even now. And that evening is always, it's therapy for me. So those things are really, but don't be afraid to ask for help. If things aren't working for you, look to a different aspect of veterinary. Say you can end up teaching back at a vet school. You can do charity work. You can go into the government. You can do film and TV work. So, and there's a lot more support out there for people wanting to branch out of first opinion. Talk to your bosses. If your working environment isn't, or your working hours, we just have to get better at having those conversations. But the support is there. Find yourself something that you love doing outside of work as well. That was a real game changer for me, finding a hobby that I could get myself lost in and switch off from for just an hour a day.
What's yours, Nikki?
I like CrossFit.
Oh my
God! I come home and throw a barbell around in the garden sometimes. It's annoying. But that is it's so important. It's having what's time for you that you can't think about work. And that might be having your own horse. For me, it's not at the moment. Now, having a horse is something I would love, but it's not right for me at this stage, whereas a barbell is. And there's also a lot of coaching available out there. There are vets I know who have moved out of veterinary and they now coach other vets as to how to manage life. So it's not being afraid to reach out.
Knowing that there are so many more options actually for those who have trained as a vet, options that I didn't know about until you just mentioned them.
Yeah, the possibilities. I think we've got a vet running in the election this time. They want to be an MP, so it really can take you anywhere. It's an exciting profession to be in. It's finding your niche, it's finding your why, and it's not being afraid to reach out and talk to others, and talk to all the support networks out there, is to find out, well, what does work for you? How can we make this a long and happy career?
Nikki, thank you so much for letting us into your world and behind the scenes into the life of a vet.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you so much for listening to and watching Curious Equestrian. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube so that you don't miss an episode and all that's coming your way, or you can subscribe to us on whatever podcast platform you listen. If you could leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, that would really help us to find lots more lovely listeners. And you can also follow us on Instagram at Curious Equestrian Podcast. We'll see you next time.